Welcome back to the Gruber Morning Show. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning and welcome.
And we are a bit late today, intentionally so, with daylight savings time changes in the United States. We've decided to play with different broadcast times for this podcast. And for this morning show, we start at 9:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. And Thursday, in 2 days, we will try a different time zone. We're not sure exactly what time that will be yet, but what we're trying to do is dial in the largest audience participation. And we realized inadvertently that when we did our Tesla Roadster podcast at 4 o'clock Wednesdays now, that we got a larger participation that we did than at 8:30 Mountain Standard Time in the morning. So we're going to attempt to dial that in over the next week or two and see what the best time for us to be visible and to our audience.
Also, we want to make sure, for the audience out there, let us know what is the best time for you guys too. We have found in the afternoons, we do get a lot more
engagement and participation,
engagement, and
yes.
Especially from all over the world. We had a couple people from France and different countries as well, but let us know what you would like as well, whether here in the live chat or in the comments after the show.
Sure. We've got a question coming in from TikTok. Mr. Norcal, what is the topic of this podcast? It is alternative energy, electric vehicles, a lot of Tesla talk, but we do branch out into some of the other platforms.
Yeah, it's everything EV and green energy, clean energy as well.
And the advantage that we offer is Gruber Motor Company is an independent Tesla repair shop. And what we're able to provide is a perspective that's somewhat unique in that we work on the cars every single day. And we have a lot of history with Tesla, being experts on the Tesla Roadster, which was really the first EV that made it to production, other than GM's EV1, but we didn't get to work on that one.
No, didn't quite get to work on that one. Mr. Big Country on YouTube, good morning. Good to see you again this morning.
And Pete, do you want to just give a rundown for the TikTok guy that asked that question? What we'll talk about, what are the topics for today's show that you're going to run through? Sure,
the topics for today's show, I've got a long list here. It's going to be a combination of new announcements regarding battery technology.
Yes, time permitting, we'll be talking about the first electric car with a sodium-ion battery. I think we're going to be talking about some updates on the Cybertruck as well.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like a question came in already from YouTube. Xcube, is Scan My Tesla a good tool to check the battery health of my Model S 2015? We have not done any reverse engineering or any analysis of the software called Scan My Tesla. So we're really counting on the audience to provide some feedback. If any of you have that, maybe you can answer Xcube's question on YouTube.
Mr. Norcal has a follow-up question for us. He's asking, what about cold fusion? We've definitely had conversations about cold fusion and will in the future.
Yeah, we're big fusion fans here. I don't know about cold fusion. That's a different thing as far as I understand it, but yeah, fusion is the future.
There was an article released by some researchers at, I think MIT, this week, which indicated that they are making progress toward commercialization of a fusion-type energy source. It's pretty exciting stuff, and it, according to the article, it could replace all electricity generating methods if it comes to fruition.
It's an exciting time in energy generation.
So we usually cover some news items in these podcasts to get things rolling. One of them that I wanted to share with you was a local Facebook comment from one of the Tesla Facebook sites. And it was an observation about the Tesla Investor Day. And one of the comments was, I see Elon is running on his own time as usual. Investor Day presentation is about 20 minutes late so far. Well, it's not always late. I've seen most of their shareholder meetings, and they're usually on time. And since we run a production operation here, I can tell you that there are all kinds of unforeseens that happen that are outside of our control. Like this morning, for example, we lost our microphone to the TikTok camera. So with all best intentions, I'm sure that they were planning on being on time. What was also said about that Investor Day was, and there are a number of opinions. One of the gentlemen said Investor Day was a bust, without elaborating. And then someone mentioned, well, they did mention the next generation vehicle at half the cost. And they did not, however, call it a Model 2. And we have a picture of what we think the Model 2 is going to look like. We can throw that up. Some comments also were that they will double supercharger capacity or installations this year alone. Now, that kind of looks like a small Tesla, does it not?
That really does look like a, man, that looks like a mix between a Tesla and like a VW Golf or something like
I was
that.
going to say that, or Mini Cooper or something.
Yeah, or Mini Cooper.
And if it was flattened a bit, it could almost pass for the next generation Roadster, you know?
Yeah, definitely could. Definitely could. By the way, for our YouTube audience, at some point, Richard's going to be coming on screen for just a minute.
Just about to say. I'm going to go ahead and correct this TikTok camera real quick.
Okay.
It's a little
And-
wonky, a little lopsided.
While he's doing the TikTok camera adjustment, for those of you that are live on the other platforms that see an image behind us on our green screen, we usually like to post an image that has been collected over the last 3 or 4 decades. And this particular one is in the Italian Alps. It is a beautiful section near Merano, Italy. And there's actually a castle here too that Reinhold, and I can't remember his last name, he's a famous climber that went up Mount Everest, an Austrian. And he bought a castle not too far from this little hill or this little peak here. And he has generously opened that up as a site where people can tour. So continuing with some of the comments from the Tesla Investor Day, they said that mega batteries are sold out with unlimited potential, and that a Dateland supercharger will even have a mega battery. So it looks like the semis can charge there as well.
That's going to be an important thing for the semis to be able to charge. For a lot of people that don't know, the route that goes between either San Diego or Los Angeles and Phoenix is kind of an ideal trucking route. It's about 5 to 5.5 hours. That's enough time for a truck to get to from Los Angeles to Phoenix to the distribution centers on the westernmost area of the metro area, drop off their load, pick up another trailer, and get back to Los Angeles, all in one day's time. Having some sort of charging on the way means that it looks like they're going to be expanding their network. Instead of just doing the Tesla Semi down in Southern California and Central California, probably be coming out to Arizona as well soon.
And with long-haul trucking, the efficiencies gained by parking somewhere while they're unloading and having charging stations also means that there's no more trip or there's no more delay.
By all means. So to me, I take that as a really exciting type of announcement.
Mm-hmm. By the way, one final thing, Tesla Investor Day, what people liked was heat pumps. Heat pump conversion from the old AC compressor world.
You know, and here in Phoenix, we take it for granted because heat pumps have been part of what builders have used for houses for at least the last 30 years. Mm-hmm. But heat pump technology is actually really new in most parts of the United States and in many parts of the world. A heat pump is simply one of the most efficient methods of moving heat in or out of a space that exists today. So we can take and move hot air out into Phoenix's 110 degree heat. We can take and bring heat in from even 0 degree weather, and the heat pump is typically more efficient as a method to do that. Mm-hmm. I was kind of amazed when I saw that on the Investor Day, how big heat pumps were going to be as far as their energy footprint in the future.
Well, it's no surprise that Tesla is embracing new technology wherever they can, and we'll talk a bit later about the 48-volt architecture in vehicles, and definitely one of the auto manufacturers needed to make that change, and Tesla grabbed the bull by the horns and did it.
By all means. You know, I've even seen heat pumps are not limited to homes and stuff like that. Tesla's putting them into their cars. Mm-hmm. I've even owned a water heater that had a heat pump on the top of it to help reduce energy.
Yeah, okay. TikTok, Mr. NorCal, what's a great EV for a lower price? You know, there is a huge selection of EVs out there. Think 10 years ago, there was virtually nothing. Tesla Roadster was about it. And today, I can't keep up with the brands anymore. My Facebook is constantly streaming yet another model, at least 2 or 3 a day. So if you do your homework, do some research, we don't have any specific recommendations other than Tesla, of course. But there are plenty to choose from and a variety of price ranges too. I think one of the best deals currently is the first generation Tesla Model S's. The fundamental reason is you can pick one up for $25,000 to $30,000 and you get free supercharging, which
and a lot of these vehicles are going to be eligible for the new $4,000 EV credit as a used vehicle. So that makes the prices even less. I know that we're going to be doing a video on some used Teslas soon, aren't we?
I think the team is upstairs working on one right now, right?
Yeah, Max is up there working on a script for us.
It'll be very informative. There's a tickler out on TikTok already that gives a bit of the same data that we'll expand on in the larger version YouTube video. TikTok, user 32, what about the Camaro? I don't know. Is there an EV Camaro?
Now, and user 27 asks about the Prius as well. I'm not sure on the Camaro myself. The Prius is typically a hybrid technology, even though some of the newer Priuses that are coming out are plug-in hybrids. We really are more of the straight EV advocates as opposed to the hybrid advocates. The electric vehicle is so much simpler than a hybrid or an ICE engine vehicle.
Sure. If you want to see a TikTok rant that I did when I found out that GM was making a hybrid Corvette, it'll be an entertaining one for you. I won't bore you with too many details, but it's a step backwards. We're trying to get emission-free transportation, and here we're keeping an ICE engine in a car with an EV with twice the maintenance. So again, as I asked in the video, GM, what were you thinking? And they quickly changed a few weeks after that, actually. I'm sure I don't think it was in response to our podcast, but they actually did announce now a 100% electric vehicle Corvette. But the Corvette, the Corvette brand now is also going to branch off into four-door vehicles and a SUV. And again, I'm just shaking my head. It's the wrong direction. It's the wrong image for Corvette anyway.
You know, Mr. NorCal has a follow-up question. Are the vehicles all-wheel drive? Typically, electric vehicles that have dual motors do have power going to all four wheels, and so are considered to be all-wheel drive vehicles. Electric vehicles that have one motor are typically either putting that motor either in the back or in the front, not both. I think with the Model S, you can confirm for me, the single motor vehicle is a rear-wheel drive, and then the dual motor is an all-wheel drive, correct?
It is, that's correct. They put a smaller motor in the front that runs the two front wheels.
Okay.
It looks like YouTube. My Melt has a question. He says, or asks, I thought you once moved a brick roaster from Hawaii to your shop. What was the total transportation cost? Of course, the prior rates must have been lower than today. We did not move a car from Hawaii to here, but a power electronics module, a PEM, which basically can be crated. And those are shipped to us from all over the world, and that's far more reasonable than trying to ship a car. Trying to move a car between countries is not for the faint of heart. You get into, well, you know, tax issues, customs issues. The silliest one we were trying to buy a parts car from Hungary about 6 years ago or so, and it would have been a good addition to our parts program, but the final analysis was they would not let us bring the car over unless we remove the engine from the car. And try as we may, we tried to point out to the bureaucrats, there is no engine in a Tesla Roadster, there's an electric motor. Is that an engine? And no one could make a decision on that. So we finally scrubbed the project. We could not bring this parts car in from Hungary.
And that's too bad. Yet I was smiling and laughing too, because we have had a couple cars come from overseas. We have the Roadster that made the trek around the world, and actually came across from Europe to the United States on a clipper ship that was only wind powered. That was quite an adventure, not only to get it over here, but to get it through customs was quite the thing.
I think you were involved with that customs issue for a couple of months or so.
Oh, it was. I don't think it was a couple of months, but we were 2 or 3 weeks trying to just get things through customs, and honestly, we were breathing a little bit of a sigh of relief. The wind was not favorable for the ship, so it ended up docking almost 2 weeks late. And it took us that full 2 weeks to get all the red tape done through customs.
Mm-hmm. All right, so one other news item I have here is we're wondering when one of these OEMs, other than Tesla, was going to come to us and say, hey, can you guys repair our cars, do warranty work on our cars? Realizing that many of these OEMs are too focused on meeting production goals and deadlines to keep the shareholders happy, and all of the revenue, at least, or the investment capital, is being spent on developing production lines rather than a service delivery network, which is equally as expensive. So we knew that eventually these types of OEMs would be coming to companies like us that are versed on working on EVs. And we have our first one. Without giving you the name, the question came up through LinkedIn, and it was, we were wondering if you thought about repairing our vehicles and supporting us in the Valley here in Arizona. And my answer was, of course, we can support your vehicle as an outsourced service organization. We bring a decade of EV repair experience and expertise. And he says, thanks, it will be the end of the year. We'll let you know when we have it in hand. So it looks like we've got our first subcontract arrangement or outsourced repair arrangement.
That's pretty exciting to see for us here at Gruber Motors. I'm sure that the technology on this new brand of vehicle, that's actually one of the newer ones being distributed, but fairly common, going to be very similar to what we do with Teslas.
Mm-hmm.
Got a good amount of questions flowing in here, guys.
Yeah. YouTube Core Glass asks, why did nobody seriously build a diesel hybrid? Seems like a good option for trucks. Most likely because of the additional expense involved. To propel something as large as a diesel or a long-haul truck to electric is quite costly. And then you have the cost of whatever the other propulsion method is, which is diesel in this case. Mm-hmm. You know, like Tesla has demonstrated with their semi-truck, it can be achieved 100% with just EV-type propulsion system.
You know, and the very largest of the diesel trucks are the ones that go into the mines and stuff like that, and built by Laterno and other large manufacturers. Mm-hmm. For a couple of generations, they have been electric, just that they have a large diesel generator that then powers 4 electric motors, one sitting in each wheel.
Sure.
I was going to say Edison Motors actually did make a diesel hybrid.
Yeah.
They have, I just watched one of their videos on it. They've got a giant diesel engine, basically, right, that charges, like Mark was saying, the batteries that are on the sides of this really, really old logging truck.
Right.
And they claim it works very well.
We did some research on them, and we'll have them in our podcast, feature them in the podcast a bit later. We'll have pictures of the team up there too, and we're going to give Edison Motors some love here in a little while. But in the meantime, I've got an interesting question here from YouTube Indomitable. He says, which is the best Tesla, Model X or Roadster? Well, it depends on who you ask. If you're a family man and you've got 6 kids and grandma and a dog living with you, then that Model X is perfect for you. If you've just gone through a divorce and you're in midlife crisis, then the Roadster's your car. So it depends on what your aim is. Personally, I love the Roadster. Not that I've gone through a divorce recently, but it's a 2-seater sports car, and I'm used to driving some pretty cool cars. And the Roadster meets all of my need for speed, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That other thing, too, is that Model X is only a half a second slower if you get the plaid version of that Model X.
Yeah, I was embarrassed to talk about the speed of a P100D ludicrous Model X. It will beat the Roadster, hands down. It'll beat a Lamborghini, you know. So I'm not embarrassed.
You're talking original Roadster, though.
Yeah, the original Roadster. Yeah.
Yeah, for the original Roadster. Yeah. But you know, for the grocery getter, man, you just can't beat the Model X. I know that my wife will see a Model X driving down the road, and even though we have an electric vehicle, she's like, okay, I want that someday.
Yeah, yeah.
Core Glass on YouTube asks us, what's your guesstimate on charging speeds in 2030? So that's 6.5 years from now. 1,000 kilowatt, 2,000 kilowatt. I'm going to assume also any other number.
Well, first of all, let's get rid of the notion that charging has to be done with a cable. At 1,000 to 2,000 kilowatt, you're going to have a cable the size of a tree trunk. So there are much better technologies emerging, and one of the cool things about being in a highly disruptive period like we are now, where there's enormous demand for electric vehicles, technology and innovation rule, and the improvements are exponential. By 2030, we may not be plugging in cars anymore. We may have solar panels on top of the cars with photovoltaics that are so dense that it will charge the car without you ever needing to plug in, and inductive coupling buried in the roadways, charging while you drive, is another real possibility. So it's hard to predict. Just take a look at the last 10 years.
Well, it is very hard to predict. We've had people who have come to us with graphene batteries that have charging rates that are as much as 10 times the rate of what a Tesla battery can charge at right now. And I know here locally there's a company, Atlas Motors, that is putting together a battery technology that the gentleman who founded it talks about having a large pickup truck that runs on diesel, like the F-350 equivalent, being able to fill it up in 10 minutes at the gas station, wanting to have a large pickup truck with an electric battery, similar range, and be able to fill it up in 10 minutes. They run 1.2 megawatts of energy into that battery right now. So that's 1,200 kilowatts, and they can, in their tests, they can charge their battery in about 10 minutes.
Cool. Atlas, we've been plugging you. We've been trying to get a hold of you. We want you on our podcast. You guys are local. You're right here. We'll come to your facility. You guys come here, a combination of both. We would love to get your thoughts on where this whole EV thing is going and plug your company and your product. So if you're listening, we can't get you by phone or email. We're ready if you are. So YouTube, Almost Monster 2066 asks, most mechanics will have to retrain. Oh, it's in anticipation of an earlier question. Let's go there first. YouTube Itachi JI, does EV kick mechanics out of business? We have a couple of videos on our YouTube channel that actually explore this subject in great detail, and I suggest if you're really interested, take a look at our YouTube channel for that answer. But the next answer to that question is from YouTube, Almost Monster 2066, who says, most mechanics will have to retrain. EVs are so much easier to work on. Well, let's put that in perspective. We're a service organization, and the thing that prevents us from replicating all over the United States or all over the world for that matter is that we have a manpower shortage. We can't find people that have those skills. We can't go to the local dealership and poach employees. If we hire mechanics, they have no clue how to work on EVs, yet anyway. Eventually, the dealerships are going to be working on electric vehicles, and they'll have cross-training programs. But for now, somebody that has spent their entire life getting very good and becoming a master mechanic cannot work on electric vehicles. They can do the low-tech stuff, brakes and tires and suspension, but when it comes to firmware, doing electronics type repairs, they are out of their league. There are 380,000 mechanics in the United States that are going to have to pivot and convert and expand their skills.
Well, hold on, Pete.
Yeah,
I think you just said 380. I think it's 780.
780,000.
That's what we put in our video a while ago. The numbers have probably changed in the last year and a half since we did that video, but it's hundreds and hundreds
Way
of
up there.
thousands.
Yeah. So our simple answer is we haven't been able to do it. We have to home grow all of our talent. And we typically go, instead of to mechanic shops to hire people, we go into the electronic shops. We go to people that are conversant with oscilloscopes, software, with component level troubleshooting. That's what, in the independent space at least, where you're not module swapping, where you have to troubleshoot the component level, those are the skills required to do work at our level.
And the challenge there, of course, is that it's just as hard, it seems like, to find somebody who is, for lack of a better way of saying it, an electrical engineering nerd who has good mechanical skills.
Right.
Although it does seem to be a little bit easier to train mechanical skills than it is to train software.
Well, as I often joke, and when you get the guys in the lab that can do the electronics repairs and you ask them to go out on the shop floor and get grease under their fingernails, the answer usually is no, that's not me.
Yeah. Jiminy Stack from Facebook has checked in this morning, and good morning, Jiminy. He mentions that the Chevy Bolt is a Best Buy electric vehicle. It's currently 26K with a 260-mile range and only 19K after rebates. Thank you so much, Jiminy. He's a regular contributor to the podcast here and always is a welcome voice. He also mentions that a train is a diesel hybrid.
That's right. I forgot about that.
I had forgotten about that. Train engines are typically large diesel generators running electric motors.
Mm-hmm. So we get some attention on LinkedIn often, and one of the things we usually post is any successes we've had in our shop. And we posted one about a Tesla Roadster that came to us, and they usually come in pretty sad. The wheels are locked, the PEM blew up, there's damage inside the electronics, the battery may be bricked and dead, and the owners are typically beside themselves, thinking, "Oh, my car's dead. It will never run again," right? So by the time they get here, we do a number of things, and it's usually like magic, and the owners are very pleased with the end result, which is they get to drive their Roadster again. So we posted one of these, and the feedback started coming in on LinkedIn. A Lucid employee said, "Appreciate all you do." Then a ex-Tesla engineer said, "I really loved working on those cars." An automation engineer comment was quite amazing, but then I liked and then another one, "Brilliant work, Pete," from another individual, but I like Mark Northwood's comment the best. It said, "If EVs are ever to become true classics, then we will need brilliant companies like Gruber and others to be successful businesses. We also need to encourage or force the manufacturers to keep supporting these vehicles with parts and service to keep them on the road. Otherwise, they fail in their mission to make a positive impact."
Boy, that is such a great comment. There are simply too few shops out here. I know of a few places other than Gruber Motors, very few places that do service for electric vehicles, Teslas, Roadsters, you name it. There is so much work that's going to be coming in the next few years. As there become more shops open, they're going to find that they are just overwhelmed with business.
And we have had 3 chances to build our EV shop. And one of the things that our social media team did a great job of was documenting the entire process. And we are going to release a video at some point that shows the other EV shops, which will be ubiquitous and all over the planet, the successes that we've had and some of the best practices that we're willing to share.
Yes. We have 2 comments here that are still related to the charging question that we had earlier. First is Jiminy Stack again. On Facebook, he says that Tesla has introduced megawatt charging for the Semi and the Cybertruck already. Mm-hmm. So that kind of answers what in 7 years would we be looking at? 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt, maybe more. And SoCal mentions that tree trunk cables aren't an impossibility. That may be true, but
we'd need some hydraulics, though, because my wife's ability to lift that tree trunk cable to plug into the car would probably be a challenge.
I agree. One of the more interesting ones, though, is from user 27 on TikTok. He says, "I set my phone on a charger to charge it. Mm-hmm. Is it possible to have a charger under my parking?" Short answer: yes, absolutely. That's where we think a lot of this charging is going to be going. We've talked about in the past highways that are being built, and you guys please help me with details. Inductive charging under the roadbed. You drive along the highway and charge your vehicle as you're driving. I know we've talked about that in the past.
We've done a video about that on our channel probably from about 6 months ago about the inductive coupling. They're testing it currently in Israel and then also in the Netherlands and Germany, a couple other places, where they actually have the Dan Bus company is charging city buses as they drive down the road. So it's kind of still in its infancy, but they're implementing it in places in Europe right now.
We had a viewer in one of the earlier podcasts that asked if we were able to harness lightning, would that charge the car? It certainly would, but it's uncontrollable at this point, as I think Benjamin Franklin found out.
Well, and what Doc from Back to the Future, I think, found out as well. So Eric P. on YouTube says, the glasses, dude, the Matrix, it's so sunny. Can you charge your sunglasses?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Well, it's the first sunglass question that we've gotten today. So yeah, I think we're having an impact. I think all of the answers that we provided so far are beginning to resonate. And we'll see if we get another sunglass question
Yes.
before the end of this.
Oh, we will, Pete. It's a guarantee.
Okay. All right, it's coming.
Steve McMahon on YouTube also makes a good and salient point. For at-home charging, wireless makes no sense due to losses. You know, there's another question that we kind of skipped earlier that I want to get back to as well when they were asking about the cost of charging an electric vehicle. They're very different costs, and some of the losses that, User32 on TikTok asked that question. So I still think wireless charging, even at home, could be a possibility in the future. I think, I know I own a couple of electric vehicles. The power company here in town has an EV charging rate for overnight. Mm-hmm. I can charge my Tesla Model S in about 6 hours overnight. It probably costs me $1. I can charge my Volvo. I have an XC40 Recharge, little dual motor. Love the little thing. It has a 122 kilowatt battery. It takes me about $1.10 overnight to charge it. If I go to public charging, between $10 and $15 here in the Phoenix area. But I've also found that it varies widely depending on where you're at.
So what I wanted to share with you also was, and the questions are streaming in, guys. Thank you. Let us know where you're from as well. But a quick thing I wanted to insert is the 48-volt architecture now for the low-voltage battery systems in the Tesla vehicles. If we can throw up that graph showing the progression of current draw on a 12-volt or low-voltage battery system in a car. This was a shocking graph to me. I'm going to blow mine up here a bit so I can see it better. But as you can see, around 1950 or 60 is when they converted from 6 volts to 12-volt batteries. I remember working on car radios back then, and they had 6-volt batteries, and the wires necessary to deliver the power needed were pretty thick even back then. Mm-hmm. The reason they switched from 6-volt to 12 volts in the 50s and 60s was because of the increased demands for low voltage power in the car. Things like seats with electric motors in them, heaters inside. And you can see the progression of amperage draw increases over the decades. And by the time we get to let's see here, blow up my graph so I can see the numbers. Oh, by 2000, okay, there we go. Actually 2040, the prediction. You can see that it would continue to increase in amperage, and I think the scale there says over 200 amps at some point. Well, to deliver 200 amps at 12 volts requires wire sizes that, the thickness of this thumb. And of course, you have increased weight, you have increased expense, and it gets a bit silly to have that much amperage trying to be pumped through such a low voltage source. By the way, for those of you non-technical, the relationship between voltage and current is inversely proportional. So when you double your voltage, you have decreased your current by half. By going to 48 volts, they've actually reduced the amount of power necessary to deliver voltage by 75%. Which means smaller wire sizes, smaller fuses, smaller contactors. And you can see the impact there at the maximum 12-volt range with 48 volts is substantially less. Now the question we asked during the Tesla Investor Day when they announced this new 48-volt architecture was, that means they're going to have a battery in that car that puts out 48 volts. And apparently within the last week, Tesla had released information that yes, they will be making a 48-volt lithium-ion auxiliary battery for these new Teslas that are being produced, especially the Cybertruck. So that is the news on the 48-volt system.
Pete,
Yeah.
does that make it more dangerous to work on for mechanics and things like that?
48 volts is still considered a safe voltage, and the reason I say that is for 100 years or so, telephone systems have been operating on 48 volts. Your typical central office exchanges before they had uninterruptible power systems, used to have gigantic rooms full of lead-acid wet cell batteries that were configured for 48 volts and charging systems, and that's the power that, that made the phones function all the way to your house. When your phone rings, then you get a higher voltage, and that you would actually be able to feel. But 48 volts, unless your hands are wet with salt water, you would not be able to feel that.
And in information technology today, the Category 5 and Category 6 cables, when you do power over Ethernet, that is a 48 volt power source that's going over that Ethernet channel, just at a very, very low amperage. I took a little bit of time and looked at some of the 48 versus 12 volts. Well, among the advantages is that a person could take and put 4 12-volt batteries into series and have 4 very small 12-volt batteries that actually provide better power and longevity for your car than the larger 12-volt batteries nowadays.
Now, the reason it took courage for Tesla to come out with this is there aren't any 48 volt low voltage devices for autos being made currently. So there's going to be an additional expense for a while as companies jump on the bandwagon. Their low production volumes, things like headlights, for example, are now going to have to be 48 volts. The the audio systems in a car are going to have to be 48 volts. Relays, contactors, door locks, solenoids, anything that operates off of the low voltage portion in an EV is now going to have to be upgraded to 48 volts, and that's going to require new production and new production methods and designs. So Tesla says that they will be starting to use this in the Cybertruck this year and the Optimus robot. And all future electric vehicles will be using this 48 volt system. One humorous thing I found, though, was they showed the 12 volt battery in a Tesla Model S, or in the Tesla vehicles, and projected that its lifespan was 4 years, and then they showed the 48 volt battery next to it, which is, by the way, there's another image there if you want to pop that up, which is much smaller. Well, it's been our experience, at least in the Southwest here, 12 volt batteries in the state of Arizona, or in Phoenix at least, do not last 4 years. You're lucky if you get 2 years out of that battery because of the intense heat that we have here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely a little bit humorous. There was one retailer here in town that used to advertise a 7-year battery for your standard ICE vehicles. And they eventually stopped selling that 7-year battery, and I think it's because virtually everybody at some point brought in the battery for replacement.
Sure. One other thing that I have here is a picture of a gentleman that was helping somebody jumpstart their car with his Model S. And I was shocked to see that, but it can be done because you have a 12 volt battery inside a Model S, which is somewhat accessible, but we do not recommend using it to jumpstart an ICE engine car. And here's the fundamental reason. What's in your ICE engine car is at least 70, 80 amp hours. What's in a Tesla Model S is around 30, 33 amp hours. It's a much smaller battery. It's also not a starter battery, meaning it has thick lead plates that is able to deliver a couple hundred amps or so to get a starter motor cranking. So you can damage not only the battery, but the electronics that are feeding it. Your DC to DC converter, which for example is feeding or charging your 12 volt battery in your Model S, is not expecting to suddenly have to deliver 200 or 300 amps to crank over an ICE engine starter. So although a very noble gesture, it is somewhat risky to try to use your EV with a 12 volt battery to jumpstart a ICE engine car. And of course now going to 48 volt architecture, you definitely would not want to do that, or maybe, because it would definitely crank that engine, wouldn't it?
Oh, well, it definitely
48 volts
would.
would definitely make an impact.
Yes. AL Monster 2066 on YouTube asks, will Cybertruck initially be 48 volt from unit number 1, or will it be phased in?
You know, we don't know, although this article that I just read you from was that it would start with 48 volts.
And then Steve McMahon on YouTube asks as well, our thoughts for the LFP retrofit batteries, OMU, for older Teslas for 12 volt?
You know, the answer to that is, okay, lithium, LFP is the lithium iron phosphate, which is a better technology in some ways in that it's not as combustible and but you need more cells. There's a brand of battery called Omu battery, which is made by a ex-employee of ours, actually, Sean Scher. And it is a good solution for the 12-volt replacement in the older Tesla batteries, in that it lasts longer, better than 2 years. So yes, that's our thoughts on the Omu battery, and it is available online. It's spelled OHMMU. And it'll be interesting to see whether Sean goes into the 48-volt battery lithium-ion business, because that seems to be another aftermarket opportunity at this point.
Absolutely. Itachi asked us a follow-up question as well, where he asked, do you mean that there's a lot of work that can be done on electronics from a business point of view? And this is in relation to being an EV mechanic.
Sure. Well, explaining that for a moment, if you're looking to have a career in repairing EVs and you go to work for an OEM, you're going to be doing low-tech auto and a lot of module swapping. And what I mean by that is when the body controller goes bad, or the DC to DC converter fails in the car, you're going to be swapping the entire assembly, which is pretty mechanical. It's in the independent space where we are that we don't have the luxury of large parts rooms full of stored modules. We actually have to open up those things and go inside and repair the component level, including the main propulsion battery. If you go to a Tesla service center and your main battery is bad, they give you one option. It's a $20,000, $22,000 replacement, because at the service center level, they don't open those up and repair them. They do back at Lathrop, which is where they do remanufacturing. So in the independent space, if you're looking to work for an outfit like that, you're going to need the broader electronic skills, because everything we do is opening things up and chip chasing right down to circuit board level and to component level, and using a wide variety of test equipment to isolate the problems. And of course, being familiar with the components on those circuit boards is what an electronics education affords you. It's certainly not going to be a mechanic education from UTI or Mechanics Motorcycle Institute.
Mr. Lewis on TikTok gives us our second great sunglass question of the day. Interesting show, he says. But what's with the sunglasses?
Well, we're going to have a video someday that will explain the reason for the sunglasses, and I think it will be very enlightening for the legions of people that have asked why we have sunglasses during not only our podcasts, but during our videos.
Yes. The best thing I can say is put a pair on and watch us.
Okay,
see what you're missing.
We have a little bit of time left. We're at 10:17.
13 seconds. Okay. Why don't we go into the Edison motor story at this point? This is a company, by the way, Edison Motors, which playing on, Tesla Motors, Edison Motors, those two guys were rivals. They both were very quirky personalities. I'm very familiar with Thomas Alva Edison, because the vocational high school I went to was called Edison Tech in Rochester, New York. And Thomas Alva Edison was omnipresent in all of our literature and pictures in the various classrooms. He was a revered individual. And later on, I became to understand that there really were more pioneers than Thomas Alva Edison, including Nikola Tesla, which is the name that Tesla chose because of the three-phase AC induction motor, which he invented. Thomas Alva Edison was very focused on DC. He even wanted to do long-distance DC transmission, and they actually buried large cables in New York City underground to transmit DC voltages with high rates of losses by the time you got to the other end. And Westinghouse and Tesla were far more realistic in their approach to what kind of voltages should be used for the electrification of America. With AC, you can transport it long distances, you can step it up, step it down, and you have a lot more versatility. And a three-phase AC induction motor is far more efficient than any DC motor ever could be, because of its 120-degree phase relationship and pulling the rotational mass as it goes. So anyway, having said all that, there's a company that was created up in British Columbia called Edison Motors. They are a privately held clean energy company that manufactures electric semi-trucks. They've got one so far that they built. And what I like about these guys is, can we throw up a picture of the team, guys? They're loggers. and truck drivers. And they decided to innovate and think outside the box and actually electrified one of these large logging trucks. And now they feel they have a business opportunity to replicate this and continue to make these trucks. They actually were founded in 2021, so they're fairly new. In 2022, July of 2022, they built North America's first electric logging truck. Don't know what the range is, but it'll be interesting, and I'm sure there are no mega chargers up there for them to charge on, so I can only imagine what it would take to charge up this beast. They completed prototype testing by October 2022, and they are now working on their first production truck, the Edison L750. And they plan to produce these commercially or do conversion kits that offer fuel savings for trucks like this. And again, we respect this kind of effort because these guys are innovators. They're willing to lay their necks on the line and spend some money and develop something that provides an alternative energy source for transport like this. And by the way, if you guys are listening, we get a lot of comments during our podcasts. Have we ever heard of Edison Motors? And each time I used to say no until I finally researched it, and you guys popped up. And you know what? We'd love to have you on our podcast and get your backstory because I'm sure it's a fascinating one. So if you're watching or you get word, reach out to us, and we're more than willing to do some collaborations with you guys.
And that was an awesome dump truck.
It was, wasn't it?
In front of.
Logging truck, sorry. Yeah, logging truck, yeah.
They had a dump truck there in the foreground, a logging truck in the background, and they've electrified a logging truck.
Okay, guys, we're at 10:21 now. Pete?
Yeah.
Mark, if you want to go, and Pete, you want to keep going, we can do that, or if you guys want to wrap it up, it's up to you guys.
Well, I think we've gone an hour. We can probably wrap. What we can predict at this point is that we will have we will have our Thursday podcast. It won't be at 8:30 normal Mountain Standard Time, and we'll let you guys know when the most opportune time for us is. It will be sometime in the morning, and if we go into afternoons, which may be the case, we will no longer call it the Gruber Morning Show.
Right.
That name's got a ring to it.
It does, though.
I know. Well, you know, it's morning somewhere.
Yeah, that's true.
It'll be morning somewhere. Maybe we go to Hawaii and do the morning show in Hawaii or something. But we will see you guys on Thursday. Look forward to it. We'd love to get your comments. You tell us what time works for you. That's really what we want to be here for, is the best time for what you guys are here. We are here to answer questions and to do things for you, the community. That's kind of why we exist.
And our sweet spot, by the way, in terms of time availability is Mountain Standard Time from 7 a.m. until 5 p.m.
We do want to just let them know we have got a lot of comments that have come in. We will get to those next show.
Fair
By
enough.
all means,
Yes.
we will
Yeah.
get to them. Yeah, I can see that there are some comments that we haven't gotten to, although I have to say, Eric P., thank you. We do rock.
Yeah. Again, we appreciate all of you. We're having fun doing this. I hope you guys are. And if there's any information we can impart from our experience, we're more than willing to do so. Tomorrow we have our Tesla Roadster podcast at 4 o'clock, and that's for the Roadster community.
4 p.m. Mountain Standard.
Mountain Standard Time, exactly, which is now different than California time with daylight savings. So make sure you check your time zones. But we invite those of you that have Roadsters to join us, or those of you that want to buy a Roadster, the next generation. We'll talk about that as well. So again, thank you for joining us. We'll see you Thursday.
See you on Thursday.